Emily Harper was a bright, vivacious 16-year-old girl who lived in a small town nestled in the shadow of a great mountain range. She had a passion for life, a contagious laugh, and dreams of exploring the world. Her small-town life, however, felt like a cage to her. She longed for something more, something thrilling and extraordinary. It was during one of her routine visits to the local airfield with her father, an avid aviation enthusiast, that she met Jason Miller. Jason, a private pilot in his late 20s, was immediately drawn to Emily's youthful energy and curiosity. He was a tall, striking man with a commanding presence, exuding an air of confidence that Emily found irresistible. Despite their age difference, the two quickly developed a strong bond, with Jason often inviting Emily to join him on short flights over the town. As they soared through the skies, Emily felt free for the first time in her life. Her admiration for Jason grew with each passing day, and soon, it blossomed into love. Jason, aware of Emily's innocence and naivety, played the part of a charming and caring suitor. He showered her with attention, taking her on thrilling adventures and introducing her to the high life. Despite her parents' concerns about the age gap, Emily was convinced that Jason was her soulmate. She was blinded by the glamour of the world Jason showed her, a world far removed from the simplicity of her small-town existence. Before long, Emily and Jason were inseparable, and against her parents' wishes, she agreed to marry him just after she turned 18. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, held in a secluded chapel deep in the woods. Emily's parents, reluctantly attending, couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in their hearts. Jason, however, seemed to be the perfect groom, loving, attentive, and devoted. He promised Emily a life of adventure and luxury, a promise that thrilled her beyond measure. After the wedding, the couple moved to a remote cabin Jason had purchased near a pristine lake, far from the prying eyes of the town. The cabin was Jason's private retreat, a place where he could escape the pressures of his job and relax. For Emily, it was a dream come true, a beautiful home in the wilderness, with her beloved husband by her side. As time passed, Emily gave birth to their son, a beautiful baby boy who quickly became the center of her world. The couple named him Ethan. For a while, it seemed like Emily was living in a fairy tale. But beneath the surface, things were not as perfect as they seemed. As the months went by, Jason began to show signs of his true nature. He became increasingly controlling, dictating who Emily could see and where she could go. He insisted on managing all their finances, leaving Emily with little autonomy. He often disappeared for days on end, claiming it was for work, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Jason's temper grew shorter, and he began to isolate Emily from her family and friends, forbidding her from contacting them. He was particularly cold towards their son, Ethan, showing little interest in fatherhood. Emily, who had once been so full of life, found herself trapped in a nightmare. One night, during one of Jason's unexplained absences, Emily discovered a hidden drawer in Jason's office. Inside, she found documents revealing a side of Jason she had never known. There were several life insurance policies in her name, as well as records of large debts Jason had accumulated over the years. The discovery left her shaken, but she couldn't bring herself to confront Jason. The cabin was dark, the only light coming from the flickering fireplace. Emily sat alone in the living room, holding Ethan close to her chest, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. Jason had been distant lately, his moods shifting from cold indifference to sudden bursts of anger. Emily was terrified of what he might do, but she felt trapped, unsure of how to escape the life she had unwittingly walked into. That night, as the wind howled outside, Jason returned home. He was in an unusually good mood, his earlier anger seemingly forgotten. He suggested they take a family trip to a secluded cabin in the woods for the weekend, a chance to relax and rekindle their relationship. Emily, desperate to salvage what was left of their marriage, reluctantly agreed. The cabin was nestled deep in the woods, far from civilization. It was a beautiful, rustic retreat, surrounded by towering trees and a crystal-clear lake. But as they arrived, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. Jason seemed tense, his eyes darting around as if he was expecting something, or someone. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Emily tried to talk to Jason about the documents she had found. But before she could say anything, there was a sudden, violent crash. The front door burst open, and two masked men stormed into the cabin, brandishing weapons. Jason grabbed Emily, pulling her to the floor as the men ransacked the cabin, demanding money and valuables. Emily was terrified, clutching Ethan as the men tore through their belongings. But something about the situation didn't add up. The men seemed to know exactly where to look, and their actions were strangely methodical, as if they had been rehearsed. As they moved through the cabin, one of the men glanced at Jason, a silent exchange passing between them that Emily didn't miss. It was in that moment that Emily realized the horrifying truth. This was no random robbery. Jason had planned the whole thing. The masked men eventually left, taking only a few items with them. But the damage was done. Emily was left trembling on the floor, clutching Ethan, as Jason tried to console her. But his words were hollow, his touch cold. Emily knew then that the man she had married was a monster. The next morning, Emily woke up to find Jason gone. Panic set in as she searched the cabin, but there was no sign of him. Frantic, she ran outside, only to find Jason standing at the edge of the lake, staring out at the water. When she approached him, he turned to her with a look of cold determination. Without warning, Jason grabbed her, dragging her towards the lake. Emily fought back, screaming for help, but they were too far from civilization for anyone to hear her. Jason, fueled by his desperation and greed, pushed her into the icy water, holding her under as she struggled to break free. As her vision blurred and her strength faded, Emily's thoughts turned to Ethan. She had to survive for him, but it was too late. The last thing she saw was Jason's face, devoid of any emotion, as the darkness swallowed her whole. Jason staged the scene to make it look like Emily had drowned accidentally while trying to retrieve something from the lake. He returned to the cabin, where he coldly called the authorities to report his wife's tragic accident. The local police were quick to arrive at the scene. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be a tragic accident, a young mother who had slipped and drowned in the lake. But something didn't sit right with the lead detective, a seasoned investigator named Sarah Collins. Detective Collins was a no-nonsense woman with a keen eye for detail. She noticed inconsistencies in Jason's story, small, subtle things that didn't add up. The way he avoided eye contact, the lack of emotion in his voice, the fact that Emily's belongings had been packed as if she was planning to leave. Collins began digging into Jason's past and quickly uncovered a trail of deception. She discovered the life insurance policies and the debts Jason had hidden from Emily. She also found evidence that the masked men were not random intruders but rather hired criminals with connections to Jason. As the investigation progressed, more details emerged. Witnesses came forward, describing Jason's controlling behavior and the way he had isolated Emily from her family and friends. It became clear that Jason had been planning Emily's murder for months, meticulously staging the robbery and the drowning to make it look like an accident. With mounting evidence against him, Jason was arrested and charged with Emily's murder. The trial was a media sensation, with reporters flocking to the small town to cover the shocking story. Emily's parents, devastated by the loss of their daughter, attended every day, hoping for justice. During the trial, Jason maintained his innocence, insisting that Emily's death was a tragic accident. But the evidence was overwhelming. The hired criminals testified against him, revealing the details of the staged robbery and Jason's role in the plot. The life insurance policies and the debts provided a clear motive, and the jury quickly found him guilty. Jason was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for Emily's parents, no sentence could ever bring their daughter back. They took custody of Ethan, determined to raise him in a loving home, free from the shadow of his father's crimes. Years later, the cabin by the lake stands empty, a silent witness to the tragedy that unfolded there. The once beautiful retreat is now overgrown with weeds, the windows shattered, and the walls covered in ivy. It is a place forgotten by time, much like the memories of Emily Harper. Ethan, now a young man, grows up with the stories of his mother's kindness and bravery, told to him by his grandparents. He never knows his